Kevin Costner and Christine Baumgartner divorce case. You've probably been hearing a little bit about this in the news. There's a lot going on here. There was a prenuptial agreement. They've been married almost 20 years, and they're splitting up. They got 3 children together. And then the latest I was hearing is that because Christine is challenging the validity of their prenuptial agreement, Costner's lawyers are saying, well, that will mean that she gets nothing. If she challenges the prenup, tries to claim that it's not valid, not enforceable, then she doesn't get anything, which of course seems sort of hard to believe, but these provisions are in there. They want to keep the other person from challenging it, dragging it out, costing attorney fees, and doing all these things when there's a prenuptial agreement. The question is whether the prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. The question in most states, how they look at it, is was the agreement reasonable and fair at the time that it was signed almost 20 years ago? Is it still reasonable and fair today? A provision like that doesn't really sound like it's reasonable or fair, but there has to be some consequence for challenging it, of course. So that's the one issue they're dealing with right now. The prenup says that all she gets is $1.5 million, when his net worth is $250 million probably. So she's trying to get more than that out of it, obviously. Kevin Costner at this point, 68-year-old, Oscar-winning actor. His career just is nonstop, keeps going. And but yeah, Christine's challenge of the prenup, she's trying to get more money out of it than the $1.5 million, which according to a lot of news sources, People Magazine, everywhere else, he's already paid the $1.5 million that he owes her under the prenuptial agreement. So, are these types of agreements enforceable? Yeah, they definitely can be. In Michigan, where I practice law, they are. In most states, they're valid, they're enforceable, depending on how they're written, depending on the reasonableness, the validity of the document at the time, and whether it seems fair now. But it certainly gives Kevin Costner the right to try to fight back if his wife is going to claim that it's not a valid agreement. They've also been dealing with child support issues. They have three kids under 18, and originally Christine was looking for somewhere around $248,000 a month in child support. I'm not sure what you would do with that kind of money in child support per month, especially when she was asking that he pay extracurricular activities, medical bills, all these other expenses for the kids anyways. I'm not really sure the $248,000, $250,000 a month is really going to go just for expenses for the kids. Obviously that's well over $2.5 million a year. I don't know. Does the child support, is the whole idea of child support that these kids should have the same lifestyle they have now? Do they have a right to what's reasonable and what's typical, or is it to a right to what's reasonable and typical for kids of someone who's rich and famous? Really that's the standard here. They're looking at what's the lifestyle, and then how do you do it? Child support can be a percentage of income. That's how most states do it. And it can become astronomical if you start looking at someone making $20 million a year or whatever he's making, and then taking a percentage of that. It, of course, just becomes kind of crazy. It sounds like here the court decided that $248,000 a month was just way too much. They ended up deciding that $150,000 was adequate for now. There's a part of this prenuptial agreement, there was a provision that his wife was required to move out within 30 days of filing for divorce. Sounds like that's been contested. So, he's dealing with a mess. You write up an agreement, you think you got everything figured out, you think you're both willing to follow this agreement that you've signed all those years ago. Sounds like his wife is really not looking to follow any of this agreement. She seems to think none of it's valid or none of it's reasonable, which makes you wonder why she signed it in the first place. I don't know. I don't think so far there's nothing in the news about any claim of duress or coercion or anything. They say, well, why did you sign it if you're going to come in and later say it's not valid? But it sounds like that's the latest, is requiring Christine to move out. She gets her $1.5 million and she can be gone. But it sounds like Kevin Costner, him and his lawyers are in for a lot more than that, because she's contesting that. She's claiming she's entitled to a lot more than $1.5 million out of a settlement in this divorce case. She wants lots of money for child support, and child support is a great way to go, right? Because it's tax free. So, if you're going to get $150,000 a month tax free, that's great. That's $1.8 million a year that you don't even pay taxes on. What would you have to earn? You'd probably have to earn almost $4 million a year to end up with 1.8 net, or $3.5 million a year. So she's now in a place until these kids are 18 of getting a good 1.5 to 2 million a year in tax-free income. I mean, that's kind of extraordinary. Not sure that that's reasonable. Not sure that that's what the expenses of these kids are, but I don't know. Maybe they, is this a lifestyle they've created that you really have expenses you can't just change? Do they have, is housing just unaffordable in the Santa Barbara area where you need 5 million just to get a place to live? Who knows, right? I mean, it sounds extreme, but the courts do look at what's reasonable for these people, not what's reasonable for you and I or somebody else. We've done court hearings like this over the years. You could have somebody, their monthly bills might be $25,000 a month. That sounds crazy to me, but I'm not them. I don't have their income. I don't know where they're at. So it's all ongoing, interesting. Married almost 20 years. That means he was almost 48 at the time they got married. His career had definitely been well underway at that point, made most of the money he has probably by then. So it does seem reasonable to have a prenuptial agreement. It's just a question of whether this 1.5 million that she gets at the time of a divorce, whether that's reasonable at the time when they signed it, at the time they got married almost 20 years ago, and is that still reasonable today? That's really what the court's going to have to look at. And what about a provision like this that says if you try to contest it, if you try to dispute it, that you get nothing? I'm not sure the get nothing part is going to work. That seems like that's inherently unreasonable, but there does have to be something in place here if someone is just trying to run up fees, drag it out, and keep it going.